Today I want to discuss about 20 most important interview questions that will be asked real time. I've been asked these questions in almost most of my interviews that I've attended so far, so I thought it's good to share with you guys. So let's get started. The first one, why are you into testing? This was asked when I was actually in the first, I think in my first or second interview, I was asked this question. So you can, if you have something in mind, you can go ahead. But I thought these three keywords might be helpful for you. You can always say that you're passionate about this, you always wanted to deliver the best of the best, and you're passionate to this, and that's why you are here. And you can also say that you are a perfectionist since childhood, and you will always want to do anything perfectly, and that drive you towards testing. Also, you can say that you always believe in quality and flawless things to be delivered, so that attitude motivated you to get into testing. So these three words should be always kept in mind when you are answering: passion, perfection, and quality. So you can expand it, and you can add whatever are the key factors that motivated you to your testing. So coming to the next question, did you ever give conditional sign off? So when do you give sign off? When you are comfortable with your testing, you would provide your sign off in a mail saying that you are good with your test. So when did you ever give conditional sign off? Yes, I have given conditional sign off. Like, when did I give is when I'm not comfortable with my testing. So when I know that the level of testing I have to perform, I did not. At that point, when you are uncomfortable with the testing effort, that's when you give your unconditional sign off. So it's kind of a slight risk that you are indicating that to the state business team that there might be some sort of production issue at a later phase. It is not a green signal for the current software to be delivered to production. So even in that case, you will go and provide your conditional sign off. But always remember, like, when you're giving a conditional sign off, you should always have a proper justification. Like, if somebody comes and asks you, hey, you got enough time, but then why did you give conditional sign off? You should always be prepared to answer them that in what circumstances did you give the conditional sign off. So the second one is, sometimes what happens is when they are deferred defects, and the business, you will always, like, when you have something which is not fixed, and you will go to business and say that for this release these defects are still not fixed, so what do you want us to do? And business will say, okay, maybe you can push them to next release because I don't use that much now in production. So in that case, you will mark the status of the defect as deferred, and then you will say a conditional sign off. You will give a conditional sign off because business involved, because of whatever reasons, they don't want to push the release just because we have these open defects, which, where the use case is almost low to minimum. So that's when you give your conditional sign off. The third point, which is last but not least, is when you don't have adequate time to perform your regression testing, which is most important step that needs to be performed. So sometimes it so happens that after your functional testing is performed, after all the defects are closed, you will not have enough time to test the impacted modules. You will not have enough time to do your regression testing. So whenever you know that some other modules are impacted and you didn't test them, you should always ask for extra time. And if the business or the business analyst, if they decide that you don't have an extra time and we can't push the release, you should always give a conditional sign off and give a proper reasoning that because I didn't perform the regression testing, I'm not comfortable to give a normal sign off. Like, though the functionality looks good, there are no open defects, but still I give a conditional sign off. So you should always be prepared with the proper justification in case you are giving a conditional sign off. So these should be your answers. And coming to the next question, how do you deal with deferred defects? So when do you call a defect as deferred? So you open up a defect and assign it to a developer. Developer is not working on that. So you're almost close to your release date and you still see that the defect is open. Due to his workload or due to him involving in number of projects, he's not addressing the defect. So what you have to do is, in that case, you should ask business that you should let them know that the particular defect is still open. Now business will look at that issue, and if they think that it is minor, they will say that okay, never mind, you can push that to next release. So that means that you have to mark the status of the defect as deferred and make a note stating that this has been discussed with the product or the business team and they are okay to push this to the next sprint and go smoothly with this release. So in this case, the release date and nothing will be impacted, but the issue is, it will become a known issue. So in this case, our duty is not finished after updating it to deferred. We should always make sure that these are addressed in the next sprint. So if you are in the agile team in the next sprint, or if it is a normal flow, like it should be added to the next release. So you should check with your business analyst, follow up with him and ask him to add this to the backlog list and get it into the next release. So this is how you deal when you have a deferred defect. Coming to the next one. Is unit testing necessary? Do you ask your developers to perform this? Definitely unit testing is very, very important, guys. So when the developer is testing his own code that he developed, right, there are, like, if something is not right at that time, he will immediately fix it rather than it coming to SIT, retesting it at that phase. If it goes back, right, it will be a lot of overhead for us. So if he tests some potential things at his end before he deploying that to QA, it will avoid lot of extra time that we have to put in. So this is always a good step. It's never wrong asking your developer, like whether he has performed unit testing or not. In some projects where I worked, my managers were so strict that until we get a unit testing result sheet into the QA environment along with the build deployment, they also used to share an Excel where they used to have their own set of test cases, unit test cases. Developers used to come up with the test cases and then complete, like update the status as pass and fail, and then they used to, once they all are pass, only then they used to send the code to the SIT and also share that sheet with us. So in that way, we are sure that they already perform certain tests at their end, and it's always good for us to get started immediately. Now, in the automation industry, like we have some JUnit tests that will be run. Like it's a small unit. Like we have low-level designs. Like all the code will be divided into smaller chunks called units, and each unit will be tested by a particular JUnit test that will be run by the developer at his end before they deploy it to QA. So it's always good for us to ask and check whether they have performed, and always ask us, like encourage them to perform unit tests as much as they can. Coming to the next one, how do you deal when requirements are not clear? This is like the most common question that I've been asked. So this is how I came up with the solutions. You can add as many as you want here. So I will coordinate with my business analyst as much as I can. So I'll check with him again and again and again until I get my clear understanding of the requirement. So I'll also check with SMEs. SMEs are subject matter experts. So each domain, like if you are in the telecom domain, there will be someone within your QA team who is working since like 10 or 15 years. If you are in the finance industry, someone will be there. So check with them to understand what is this all about. Okay. So that will give you good understanding, and that will help you to understand the current requirement easily. And also you can always check with your business teams, like product or business team, approach them as many number of times as you want. And you can always schedule, like meetings with the subject as, like requirement understanding or whatever, right? And then, like until you get clear understanding, don't get started with writing your test cases. So coming to the next point, I'll document everything. Yes. So sometimes, after getting the clear understanding, it's always better we document everything in an email or a word or whatever is comfortable to you, and send it across to your business or product teams, like send it to your BA, ask them to review what you have written, and let them confirm whether the level of your understanding is correct or not. You can follow up as many times as you want, whether can you please check that email, or can you please reply back to that email, does it look good to you? You can ask these questions to them and get that response back. So once you get it, you're pretty sure that whatever you have understood is correct. If something is wrong, they would definitely come back, and if nothing is wrong, they will say that you reviewed or whatever. They'll come back saying that it's good, and that will give you 100% confidence to get started. So this is how you deal when the requirements that are given are not clear. So along with all of these first 3 points, you should always make sure that you give the feedback to your director or manager, saying that the requirements are not being documented correctly, and because of that I have to approach so many others and get these all process done, which is taking lot of time. So this is not a good practice, because we should always have proper requirement documentation. So I know how to deal when I don't have requirements, but I always prefer getting a proper documented requirement. So if something is not wrong, you should inform your director or manager, so that they can get the process streamlined, so that next time when you get a requirement, you will get it in a proper documented state. So you can justify your answer like this, and you can tell them that this is how I deal. I don't stop my testing, or I don't stop my work because I don't have my requirement, but I always parallelly get that corrected, get the process streamlined by working with my manager. Can tell this. And coming to the next one, how do you deal with non-reproducible defects? Okay. Uh, this is a most important question. So when you know that something, it's always a best practice to take or capture screenshots when you see some unusual behavior in the application that you're testing. So first take that screenshot, keep it aside, and then you do analysis, why is it happening? And if you know that it is non-reproducible, it is no bad idea to raise a defect and assign it to a developer. Let him do some more analysis and get back saying that it is not reproducible. But we should always have a proper documented state of every unusual behavior. Sometimes it might be because of environment issue, but always make sure the environment is stable before you start your testing. It should be up and running. So if it is up and running, you should they should not come back saying that you have environment issues. So it is definitely an issue, but sometimes if it is not reproducible, he will update in the defect saying that this is not reproducible, and send it back. But always get this documented. Coming to the next one, how do you coordinate QA testing with broader team? So this is the most important concept, guys. It's always better. We should always be very proactive. It is we who have to schedule QA triage meetings, or also called as QA weekly status calls, and engage all the QA team. If you 2 or 3 more people are working in your QA team, involve them, involve developers, involve business analysts, and also the product or business teams. So what is the purpose of these QA triage meetings? It will give a common platform. It will give you a QA time, so that you can clear all your questions. Like if you have some business logic questions, right, you can immediately clear in the call. And as everybody will be involved, it is good that that's the best platform, and get all your clarifications. If something, ask them again and again, no problem in that. But get proper understanding of the requirements from the product team, and get them documented. If you have a bigger project, you can schedule bi-weekly status calls also. If it is a smaller one, you can even schedule a minor, you can take 15-minute slot, involve everyone, share your status, clear your questions, and that's it, backup. So it's always good to start QA triage meetings and QA weekly status calls, and share your progress, and build good relationships with all the other teams, broader teams. Coming to the next one, Do you think testing team should be involved in the initial stage? Like, requirement analysis phase, do you think testing QA team should be involved? Yes, definitely yes. QA team should be involved as early as possible. So this will make us understand the requirement clearly from the initial phase, like what is it all about, and you will get enough time to read all the documentation, and it will give us enough time to talk to all your development team and understand how they are going to implement this. That will give us an estimate of testing, like an idea like how much time we need for each module. So it is very very important for us to be involved in the early phase. However, there are some cases where QA teams will be involved in multiple projects. So in that case, we might not be able to attend all the meetings all the time. So in that case, you can always go over the requirement documents. So as and when, like, the BA is completing the documentation part, you can coordinate with him and get that as an email, or like go to SharePoint, check what is being documented, what is that which is going to come to SIT in the later phase. So this involvement of QA in the initial phase also helps us in one way, wherein, like if you have a vast experience based on the design implementation that they are coming up with, you can suggest them that if you know that with your past experience that this design implementation might cause some issues, you can tell them that yeah do, but this is going to cause some problem, why don't you think that in this way. Like if you have a good relationship, and provided if you have very good QA testing experience, you will be in a phase that you can give suggestions to the team also, and that saves us lot of time. Like after they implement, and if you get it into QA, you anyways know that that design itself is not right, you can get that corrected in the initial phase. So these are the advantages of getting QA involved in the early phase. And coming to the next question, how do you deal when developer is not accepting your defect? Okay, sometimes I've come across some developers who actually feel insulted when they get defects assigned. I don't know if you have come across any one of them like that, but there are few. I mean, I don't say that every developer is like that, but I have faced some situations wherein some of them get offended so much if they get any defect. So it is like there is a trick to deal. We can't keep quiet. We should know how to deal with them. So this is the way I suggest, guys. Always, like make sure, like it might be you, or it might be him who misunderstood the requirement. If he's not accepting a defect, either of you might be wrong. So in that case, you send an email to your product team or business team, explaining them the actual behavior currently, that how it is behaving in SIT, and ask them whether it is correct or not. If they say no, straightforward, you can open a defect and tell the developer that boss, this is definitely wrong, this is not what they wanted. You can convey that to him in a stronger way. The other option is, like as I told you, we should always engage QA triages and weekly status calls. Sorry. So in that call, you can share your screen and ask the business right away whether whatever you are seeing currently, the functionality, whether it is right or wrong. So if they say wrong, that will be like everybody will be on the same page, and you can tell the developer that as he will be involved in the meeting as well, you can tell him that this is definitely wrong, please get it corrected. If he says that it is right, never mind, like we might be wrong sometimes too. So okay, we'll know something, correct them, we'll correct ourselves. But then it is always better, like to talk to the broader team and get, like the actual response from the business or the product teams, and get that back to your developer and ask him to fix it right away. So this is how you deal when he's not accepting your defect at all. Coming to your next question, do you think test case reviews are important? Yes, test case reviews are definitely important. So it is always recommended for you to check or review your test cases with your broader team before you actually getting started. So in this case, if you miss any, like a potential scenario, they will get back to you on the call. I always suggest you schedule a 30-minute or 15, 30 minutes to 1 hour call to go over test cases, because when you actually send them an email and ask them to review, we hardly get responses back. So it's always schedule a quick call. Maybe not every test case you can go over high level scenarios, at least, to see whether you are covering everything or not. So I would definitely say yes for this. Coming to the next one, do you do peer reviews? Peer reviews we generally do within the QA team. So when you know that somebody who is working with you, he has got like 10 to 15 years experience, as I told you, subject matter expert, he is in the telecom industry or healthcare industry, or the industry you are in right now. And it's always better if he gives a glance at your scenarios, and if you miss out something, he can immediately give you some suggestions and ask you to correct or do some modifications. And then before going to the broader team, you should check this with your peers and get them corrected. Once you do your peer review, you can expose the test cases or get them reviewed with all the broader teams. The next question is, have you involved in production release validations? So what is production release validation? So after your code is signed off, it goes through the UAT phase, and after UAT is also signed off, it will go to the actual production. So sometimes it so happens that QA will be involved to perform some production validations. So in that case, depending upon the domain you are in, for example, if you are in finance domain, you can't go into production environment and place trades. Okay, if you are depends upon the level of access that you will be given in production. So if most of the times you will have read only access, but then after the code is installed in production, you can go there into the production site and see whether whatever you have tested, the buttons, for example, any Excel exports, or the look and feel is the same as you have in your SIT environment. So in that case, if you really identify something, you can immediately alert everyone that something is not really good. So I generally come up with my production validation plan before I start my validation process. So after completing it, after the install is done, I'll start my testing in production. Just look and feel, and I have only read access, so I just check whether all the buttons are available, all the tabs are rendering correctly. So I do that, and then I'll send out an email to everyone that I have performed my production validation and everything looks good and stable in production. So you can just say this when you are asked about production release validations. Coming to the next one, do you involve or assist in UAT testing? So UAT testing is after SIT, user acceptance testing. Definitely they are the persons who will be using the actual product, so they will be having better idea of what they are doing. But again, sometimes they will take our help. They'll ask us to provide the list of test cases that we have documented. So I have experience sharing my test cases with the UAT testing team. They leverage my test cases and perform their testing as well. So it should be a friendly relationship. If they really ask us to provide support, we have to pitch in and provide our test cases to them. But it's not recommended always, because it's always better if they come up with their own scenarios, because they are the guys who will be testing, who will be coming up, who will be using the application. So they'll have better use case scenarios than what we have. But if they ask, we should always share our test cases with them. Explain your Jira workflow. So Jira is like a project management tool. So you have a workflow set up by the project manager. There will be administrator who will be the admin for the entire application. So he is the person who designs workflow. So in my company, what I use, once the developer completes his development, right, he will say dev complete. Immediately, that button will be changed to ready to QA. So then whenever he clicks ready to QA, the button will again turn to QA assigned. That's the workflow. That's how it is defined by the project manager. So once it is QA assigned, there will be an assign button wherein he'll click that and he'll assign it to me. So once he completes that, once he assigns that to me, I'll be notified with an email saying that some Jira has been assigned to my name. So that's how I'll come to know that there is something which is ready to test. and then I'll get into the Jira, complete all the validations. I'll look at that, what is all about. Once I complete my QA validations, I'll hit QA approve. If you see, like, I've indicated the begin process, development complete, ready for QA, QA approved is my task. I hit QA approved, and immediately that button will be changed to UAT approved. So whenever it is UAT approved, I again have to assign to the UAT developer. So this workflow will be indicated to you in the initial stage of project only. So they'll say, like, hey QA, if you completed your QA, please assign it to the UAT guy. His name is so and so XYZ. So I'll assign it to the UAT person XYZ. He will be notified in the same way I was notified earlier. He will start his validations, and once he completes that, it will be ready for production. It means that all the cycles have been completed and it's all set to get into production. Once I've been talking about production validations right earlier. So once the production validations are also complete, generally business or like the product team will perform production validation. So after they complete it, they'll change the ready for prod to production. This is the workflow that I follow in my company. So based upon what your company is following, you can like enhance or do some modifications to the existing workflows. Coming to the next question, what is test environment? So test environment is a set of software and hardware on which I'm performing my test. So the UI which you see, the middle tier services, the back end, everything constitute your test environment. So you perform your testing in SIT environment that is owned by QA. So whatever they have to deploy, like if development is planning to deploy anything, they have to check with you before doing that. It is all yours because you will be testing number of things in your application. So make sure that test environment is always up and running before you start your actual testing. Okay, in the same way how we have QA environment, developers will have development environment. UAT will have UAT environment, production environment. These are like 4 different environments where each person will be dedicated to work on his environment only. Okay, so getting to the next question. How often do you interact with business analyst? So I talk to him in all the below cases. I talk to him when I have any questions on requirements. So the very first person whom I approach is business analyst. If he is not able to provide enough information, then I'll move to product or business teams. And then if business team says something which is not exactly what is documented in the requirement, then I'll again come back to PA and ask him to correct it. I'll tell him that, dude, I've checked with the business team. They were expecting this, but something wrong is documented here. Can you please correct it? So I involved with BA number of times, and also to add any defects in the backlog list. So if there are any deferred defects where business say that, maybe we can defer this to next release, then I'll talk to business analyst and make him to document this or add this into a backlog list so that it can be added to your next release. So if something is too difficult to deliver within the time frame, when I have something like, when I know that there is too much of testing involved and the time limit I have is very less, then I'll immediately give a heads up to my business analyst and tell him that, this is going to be there's some problem that I see, because the level of testing that is involved and the time that I'm given is no way matching, so I need more time. And then he can then adjust the scope based on the time frame. So these are like, we regularly interact with PA on all these points, so we should have very good relationship with the business analyst always. Coming to the next one, what is code freeze? So code freeze is something like, I'm talking about testing environment here, QA environment. So asking the development team to maintain a stable QA environment. So I'll ask them not to push anything into QA environment until I inform them. So it is always good, we should have grip over the QA environment. So code freeze should always be known to the development team. We should let them know that, I want code freeze so and so date, so don't deploy or don't do anything in my environment. It's giving them a heads up about the code freeze. So do you ask for a code freeze date? I have been asked this question couple of times in my interviews. So yes, I always ask for a code free state. What is the advantage of this? So after you perform your functional testing, okay, before your release, and after you are sure that all your open defects are closed, that's when you ask for a code freeze date. Or that's when, like, maybe a day before, you let the developers know that please do not push anything to QA environment until I complete my regression testing. So for you to perform your regression testing, you should always maintain a stable environment. So if you're going on doing your regression, and if they are going on pushing something that doesn't serve your purpose at all, so it's always recommended that you communicate with your development team about the code freeze date well in advance. So coming to the next question, do you prepare requirement traceability matrix? Definitely, yes. I prepare requirement traceability very early in the initial phase of my test plan. So requirement traceability will have, like, imagine that as a table having all the requirements and its associated test cases. So coming up with a table like that will avoid missing any of the requirements in future. So in the initial phase, you can make sure that whether you are covering all the tests, all the requirements or not. That will help us determine the test scope correctly. So requirement traceability is very important. You can check my requirement traceability video if you need more information on this. So I'm just moving to the next one. What do you mean by production stability? So production stability is to make sure that we don't have any issues, code issues, production issues on the assignments that we have signed off. So once you sign off as a QA engineer, your goal should be like to achieve 100% stability, production stability. It will be bad when some code that you tested is actually failing in production. So our goal, like, though we do documentation, we coordinate, we check all our questions with business. So the purpose of doing everything, coordinating, is only to attain 100% production stability. So always make sure that the code you deliver is correct, complete, 100% tested. So I always ensure that whatever code I deliver is 100% production stability and will not have any production issues in future. So in also, I prioritize all my tasks in such a way that my primary focus, which is production stability, is never deviated. So we have to focus very, very much on the stability, because the cost of repair if something goes wrong in production will be very, very huge. So in order to avoid that, we should always maintain good production stability. So these are the 20 questions that I wanted to discuss with you all. Please feel free to post your questions and comments below. I'll reply them as soon as possible. Thank you. Have a good day.